Gordon Ramsay doesn't need a $1,000 knife to make a killer dish. It's not the knife that makes the chef. It's the chef that utilizes the knife as a precision tool. It's all about the chef's skill, the chef's technique, and knowing what they're doing. So when you talk to someone else who has expertise and experience, when you get good, valuable equipment that doesn't cost a fortune but performs the way it should, and you learn and know what you're doing, then you have a winner.
Welcome to Launch It, the Podcast Maestro, your gateway to becoming a thought leader in your field. Dive into the world of elite podcasting and master the art of influence and inspiration. And now, podcast personality, award-winning author and actress, Anne Scottlin.
Hey there, podcast fans. Welcome back to Launch It, the Podcast Maestro, where we unravel the mysteries of podcasting, especially today, one episode at a time. I'm your host, Anne Scottlin, and today we're donning our myth-busting hat. I should have brought my cool detective hat, but I forgot it. We are diving headfirst into some of the biggest misconceptions floating around the podcast world. So do you think you've got it all figured out? Well, buckle up, because we're about to shatter some of the most persistent myths in the biz today with an episode called Podcasting Mythbusters. I need sound effects. Yes, I do. So thank you for joining today. And let's see what you know about podcasting and what might be misconceptions. And let's see if we can help you out. Because a lot of times I find people are putting off starting their podcast. Is that you by chance? Because they think they need to shell out thousands of dollars for high-end gear, or maybe you're convinced that you need a massive audience to even stand a chance of success. What about bigger is better? Well, we're flipping that on its head today. We'll also talk about why your episodes don't need to be epic marathons to make an impact. And let's be real for a second. If podcasting were a guaranteed ticket to tremendous riches, we'd all be sitting on our own private yachts and sipping martinis, or your beverage of choice right now. But the truth is, you can create so much value with podcasts. So helping you break these myths and know the truth is my job. If this is your first time, please like anyway, subscribe as always, and copy and paste this link, shoot it off to someone who might enjoy it today. Hang out with me for a few seconds here while we challenge these podcast myths. And as always, you can message me on my website, annescottlin.com. If you're listening, that's ANNESCOTTLIN. So here's my challenge for you. Stick with me to the very end of this episode, because I had 4 myths to bust, but I have come up with one last myth that might just change the way you approach podcasting forever. So you're not going to want to miss that one. Are you ready? Myth number 1. You need expensive equipment. Reality check. Well, newsflash, you don't need to break the bank to sound professional. So yes, that $1,000 microphone, or do they sell them for that? Yes, they do. That $1,000 microphone might look sexy, but you can get amazing quality with under $100 and excellent quality for a couple $100. So don't get overwhelmed when you're looking at USB mic setup, at lighting setup. The real magic happens in how you use the tools you have. What is the environment you're taping in? All the things I always talk about on this show. And if you haven't, go back and listen to some of those to find out. There are plenty of affordable alternatives for recording, for lighting, for backgrounds, for editing equipment. What you need really to do is to talk to someone with expertise. Don't try to figure out mics on your own. When I started out, that's what I tried to do. I tried and failed, and I spent epic money doing it for mics that didn't work properly for what I was trying to accomplish. And of course, by the time I figured all that out, the return time had expired. So if you need to borrow a mic, no, I'm just kidding. But think of cooking, for example, right? Like Gordon Ramsay doesn't need a $1,000 knife to make a killer dish. It's not the knife that makes the chef. It's the chef that utilizes the knife as a precision tool. It's all about the chef's skill, the chef's technique, and knowing what they're doing. So When you talk to someone else who has expertise and experience, when you get good, valuable equipment that doesn't cost a fortune but performs the way it should, and you learn and know what you're doing, then you have a winner. Ding, ding, ding. So for example, check out the Minimalists podcast. These guys just started with a simple setup, right? 2 dynamic mics and a basic recording device. That was it. They weren't doing video. They were only doing audio. So 2 dynamic mics and a recording device. Now they're chart-topping podcasters and they have millions of listeners. So that's proof it's not just about the gear. It's about the content. So just like you might say, don't judge a book by its cover, but you still have to buy the book. So we want to have quality enough to get people's attention and keep it without spending a fortune when you're starting. Unless what you love to do is buy the best toys ever. A couple of my clients are like that. It is so much fun working with them. They only want the best toys ever, and we can set them up with a studio to die for. So yes, and if you want to get a little more information on mics, I'm not going to be able to go into all of that today, lights, other things, but especially the mics, go back in my podcast and watch the episode called Audio Mic 101. Audio Mic 101 will give you all the answers you need to be up and running with your podcast. So that is my bust to myth number 1, the myth that you need really expensive equipment. So myth number 2, you need a huge audience to succeed. Let's talk about that. There is value, as you know, as you've heard, in a niche audience, which a lot of people are like, I just hate the word niche. It's just so highbrow and ridiculous. And like, what is wrong with just a regular audience? Why do I have a niche audience? Well, if you haven't figured that out already, you have to hear this. It's a niche audience that is smaller but engaged. It can literally be more beneficial to you than a gigantic audience of millions of followers. I've said this so many times on this show, and I am going to say it again. Bigger isn't always better. How engaged is your audience? If it's smaller, but it's very engaged, what you really have there is quality over quantity. So with a niche audience, you're speaking directly to people who already really care about your content and your content specifically. So build trust. If you're building trust with these people, no matter if they're 200, 2,000, not 20 million, if you are in the right niche and you're an expert in that area and people are tuning into you because they want to hear you and you alone because you're an expert in your field, you have a niche audience and they are much more likely to help you achieve your goals in your podcast. It's like fishing. Do you want a huge net that catches everything or a spear that gets exactly what you're after, right? Well, I don't fish and I'm vegetarian, so I would say neither. Definitely not spear fishing. Yeah, we won't talk about fishing. This is not a good venue for talking about fishing. But yes, a huge net that catches everything, including all the little cheap fish that get thrown back in the water, or a spearfish that gets you the trophy fish. Okay, enough with the hunting analogies. I don't even know why I came up with that one. Anyway, so have you ever heard of The Pen Addict? Oh, I love this podcast so much. You guessed it. Yes, it's all about pens and pen stuff and pen paper and pen parchment and pen ink and pens. And yes, it does not have millions of listeners, but it became a go-to resource for pen enthusiasts around the world. That is a niche, my friends. Most of you already know this, but that is what it looks like. It's so specific. You could have said, I'm going to do a podcast on everything in the paper store. It could be paper store fun, right? Yes, but it's just too general. Or you could say, I'm just going to talk about writing, all the parts of it, the authors, the writing, the books, the pens, the papers, the typewriters, the computers, the printers. No, but if it's just about pens primarily, and you have pen enthusiasts who spend enormous amounts of money, by the way, for those pens, you have a niche. So Brad and Mike, you know them, Brad Dowdry, Mike Hurley, have turned their niche focus into a thriving community and business, proving that a small, passionate audience can be incredibly valuable. So small and passionate is what you need. It does not have to be massive, which is myth busting, our myth number 2, that you need a huge audience to succeed. So here's a question for you. What is your most important metric for your podcast success? Yours, in your podcast now, in your future podcast to be, what is the most important metric that you're looking for? Is it downloads? Is it engagement? Is it the very specific area of focus? Is it quantifiable numbers of people who you make well or happy or rich? Is it sales conversions? What is it? Because once you really understand the answer to that, what is the metric most important to you, you will realize in most cases that you do not need a huge audience to succeed. So just having fun with that right now. And with that in mind, we're going to take a quick break. I will be right back. But while you're at the break, please do subscribe, like if you haven't already, shoot me a message, send me your comments and questions here in the feed on whatever platform you are watching or listening on today, or just drop me a line at the website, www.annescottlin.com. I will be back in a minute to myth bust myth number 3.
Picture this. You have worked your whole life to become an expert, a leader, a change maker, but you're so busy, most people will never discover you to recognize your work. Anne Scottlin, founder of Podcast Maestro, understands this challenge. With a decade of Hollywood experience and a proven track record as a business coach, Anne turns seasoned professionals into thought leaders through the art of podcasting. Podcast Maestro offers plug-and-play services, handling everything from pre-production to distribution, so you can focus on your message while Anne and her team manage the rest. Leverage Anne's Hollywood production knowledge, strategic business insight, and social media expertise to amplify your reach and impact. If you're ready to elevate your voice, connect with Anne Scottlin at Podcast Maestro and begin your podcast journey today.
And welcome back to Launch It, the Podcast Maestro. I'm Anne Scottlin, and today we are myth busting. We are the podcast Mythbusters. I don't think that is copyrighted. I think I can say that. And I'm looking at the truth behind common podcasting beliefs, particularly, obviously, by people who haven't done a lot of podcasting or are new to podcasting or just have a figurative general understanding of podcasting. So we've already busted our first 2 myths today. Here is myth number 3. Have you heard this one? Podcasts have to be long to be good. Well, let me ask you this. How many minutes, answer this for me. How many minutes of a podcast episode are you most likely to listen to or watch before you switch to something else? Are you the 60-second gal, the 5-minute guy? Are you the I watch every single minute until the last credits have rolled? How long do you tune in? Because I'm going to guess that probably at least 80% of you are only listening from somewhere between 1 to 10 minutes on average. And that could be generous on the 10-minute side. I'm saying that because you're already podcast enthusiasts. If you're here with me watching this show, listening to this show. So I'm going to assume you already like and enjoy podcasts. For other people, that number could be much, much smaller, much shorter. So yeah, what is your average time? How many minutes? Because shorter, more focused episodes can be as much, if not more impactful than a whole hour or more show. And why is that? Well, there's many reasons for that. But of course, the first and foremost is your show is only as good as people are listening to it. Now, yes, some people would tune in the middle or the end if they're listening to the streaming version, or if they're listening to the rerun version. They usually were more likely to start at the beginning. How long can you keep their attention? Because if you're making 90-minute podcasts, let's just say for example, and people are only listening to an average of 3 minutes, the first 3 minutes, what in the world are you doing with all that extra time, money, and production value that is going on to give you a 90-minute podcast? So there is a fine line. There's a great middle of the road. So think of it like strong espresso, right? That'd be really good right now. Think of it as strong espresso. It's quick, it's powerful, and it's just what you need to kickstart your day. That is a really effective podcast. It can also be long, but did you get the value up front soon enough to keep you inspired enough to tune back in next time? That's another way to ask the question. If you only listen to 1 minute, will you tune in again next time? If you listen to an hour, will you tune in again next time? What are the chances of you really becoming an avid fan of this show? So, for example, we've talked about The Daily before, one of my favorites from the news podcast from the New York Times, which is only 20 minutes. It's concise, it's packed with value, and it's hugely popular. Or another one, I'm a foodie, right? Bite, which is that hit food podcast. And you get a whole story in just 20 minutes about incredible food, incredible stories. If you're a foodie, check it out. Giving them a free pitch here today on Bite, B-I-T-E. Again, 20 minutes, all you need, in, out, done, finished. Everybody loves it at that length. It's achievable. You can hear it on a commute. So take note on that. And remember, it's about quality. We already said this, over quantity. So if you have a really tightly edited, like the 2 shows I just mentioned, well-crafted 15 or 20-minute episode that can leave your listeners feeling informed, leave your viewers entertained, eager for more, then if that's all you need, don't be afraid to trim the fat. Your audience will thank you for it. As you know, everyone has such a short attention spans these days that if you can get all the joy and pleasure and information that's really important into 20 minutes instead of 90 minutes of just slogging it out with your guests and talking about things that are totally irrelevant to the show. Not that that's not fun, but that's really only fun for the die-hard fans, not so much for the newbies stopping by. And we talked about that in another episode recently. How is your conversion rate from first-time listeners to repeat listeners? And you always want to be having new first-time listeners. Otherwise, there's something wrong with your plan. So for myth number 3, podcasts have to be long to be good. My answer would be, Okay, myth number 4. Ooh, this is a big favorite one. Okay, myth number 4. Podcasting is always lucrative. Reality check, let's be real. If it were a get-rich-quick scheme, we would all be, like I said earlier, on our private yacht, on our private island, right? The truth is, monetizing a podcast takes time. It takes effort. It takes patience. Yes. It's like planting a garden. You can't just toss some seeds out there and expect a full harvest the next day. I remember this because as a kid, I had a garden. Well, first of all, my mom had a huge, massive vegetable garden, and I had a pretty medium-sized one myself. It was a lot. I'm not even going to tell you how many things I had planted in there because you won't believe me. I had a very large garden for a child that I wanted to have my own garden. But I learned about weeds. I learned about potato bugs. Oh my God, yes, they're real. I learned about all kinds of other bugs. I learned about drought. I learned that seedlings can't survive without enough water, or if they get too much sun all at once without enough water. So many things. You can't just plant the seed and expect every single one to sprout and work by the next day. But with the right care and strategy, those seeds really can grow into an 8-foot sunflower plant, or my biggest pumpkin ever, or lots of other great produce. And if you like to eat and you're a foodie and you like fresh food, gardening is fun. But we're talking about podcasting here. So again, it doesn't have to be lucrative, but you can't just expect to do a little bit of effort and reap an absolutely massive reward overnight. However, your podcast can create a huge value for you, V-A-L-U-E, value. And over time, it can monetize and become very profitable. But value is more important than the actual dollar signs in your balance book, okay? And here's why. So one of the things that podcasting really does is it showcases your expertise. This is hugely important. This is why I say I'm always here to create world-class shows for people who want to become thought leaders in their field. Podcasting is the means of the moment. And if you are an expert in your field, whether it's local, global, or otherwise, you have something to share that other people will want to hear because you're an expert. That means an expert just means you know a lot about something that other people don't know. And even other people that are interested in what you're interested in know less than you do. So highlighting your expertise is such a massive value opportunity with podcasting. It creates prestige. Your name, you can develop some name recognition. You can then often get invited to gigs to speak, to do other kinds of activities, gigs. You get more followers, you get more contacts, which convert to more leads, which can convert to more clients if that's what you're looking for, or it can convert to selling more books if you're an author, or merch, or whatever it is. But remember this, it's the brand, your brand, that we're building here. The value is to your brand. It's not necessarily just how much money the podcast all by itself is making you through, say, advertising. Here's an example. There's Aaron Mahnke's podcast. I hope you've listened to it, Lore, L-O-R-E. I'm a real fan because this one is about, I love history, right? This is about frightening history behind common folklore. So there's some really scary things that happened that have created a lot of the folklore stories around the world that we hear today. And Aaron started it just as a passion project, and he didn't rake in big bucks right away or anything, but he was consistent with his effort. He used very smart monetization strategies at the time he was starting, like Patreon. He got book deals. And now, because of the podcast, he's a major success story. Because he made his podcast an integral part of his brand, perhaps even the foundation of his brand. It all depends on how you perceive that. But I would like to ask him, maybe I can on this show one day, because that is how you built it. That's what gave him the name recognition. That's what gave him the edge. So your podcast is an integral part of your personal brand, whether you're a medical professional, whether you're a CEO, whether you're a professor of art history, or whether you are an exercise instructor. This is how you can really start to get a corner on the market and the global market. So you can grow beyond just the environment of your town. And last, I promise, the bonus before we wrap up here, the bonus Mythbuster for the day. What about this one? Podcasting is really easy and it doesn't take much time or preparation. Do your homework. Don't burn out, get help. The payoffs are worth it. You're going to love podcasting. You're going to love the payoffs, but just know this. Yes, I will bust this myth out of the sky. It is not easy. It does take time, and it takes a lot of preparation if you want to do it right. If you want to have a world-class show, it really does take all that. So if you're ready to take your podcast from an idea to a world-class production in a short amount of time without the hassle of doing it all yourself, then ask for help. You can block out years on your calendar to learn the hard way, to learn one step at a time. You can listen to this show and learn at a much faster rate. But if you're wanting to make an impact quickly, if the nature of your business or profession or expertise is very time sensitive, if you're an expert on AI or something right now, my gosh, why don't you have a podcast, right? Especially if you're in a niche around AI. If you wait for 10 years, that'll be such old news, nobody will care. So you see what I'm saying? So if you just want to tell really amazing stories about, I don't know, you pick it, whatever it is, just fun people stories, and they're kind of timeless, then you have a lot more flexibility. You can grow at your own rate over time and have a good time. If you're an expert in your field, and what if you had been a pandemic expert during COVID, and if you did not get your podcast, build your brand, monetize your reputation, monetize your expertise, that is still a thing, but it's not what it was in 2020. So if you see what I'm saying. So if you're wanting to coast to the top as quickly as possible, then talk to someone, talk to another expert, talk to someone like me at the Podcast Maestro. People do offer full service podcast production that helps you focus on what matters most, which is for some people, literally still your day job, because you are the doctor, you are the CEO, you are the professor, right? So, but you can still be delivering exceptional content and quality to your audience on a global scale. If you're interested, if you want to have someone working with you, it's more than a mentor, it's more plug and play. So whether you're a seasoned professional or you're just starting out, plug and play podcasting services handle everything. Like for me, if you want, I will hand write your outlines for you all the way to post everything about your podcast on an ongoing basis on your own personal social media, if you please, if you like. There's nothing that can't be covered for you. If you can show up and tape for 20 minutes with a producer, that's all you really need to do. And we have so much fun brainstorming at the time of the inception of the podcast and helping clients find out what they need. But enough about us, enough about me. But find people who can help you, who can consult with you, who can really give you that boost. And it's really fun to see how you can turn your podcast vision into a reality. So it's because you're not just launching a podcast, right? You want to launch a podcast that it commands attention and drives results, that creates value for you and the world at large. So I'm excited for you, and I hope to see you make that happen. Pop on over to annescottlin.com. Leave me a message. I would love to hear from you, an email. Check out, I'm on all the socials, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, pretty much everything. You can usually search my name, AnneScottlin, or at Anne Scottlin. Check it out, leave me a message, and please subscribe and like and invite people back. If you love hanging out, I am also looking for great ideas for season 2 of Launch at the Podcast Maestro. If you have ideas and suggestions for guests, please shoot me a message and let me know. Or for content, also let me a message. We are going to find ways to make this even more fun than we're already having as we move forward. So please keep in the loop with me. And a teaser for the next episode, creating evergreen content. You're going to want to come by for that. If you're already a marketing expert, if you've already been podcasting for a long, long time, you probably are clear on what creating evergreen content means. But it's really important to keep your podcast relevant year round. We're going to talk about that. We're going to give you examples. So come back next time to understand why creating evergreen content is so essential to having a successful podcast. Thanks for being with me today, and I look forward to hearing from you. We'll see you next time. Bye.